Welcome to the Catholic Forge, a conversational podcast where we gather to explore our Catholic faith and discuss how it forms our lives. All are welcome to join in this conversation and journey. Thank you for listening. Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Eric in Missouri.
And this is John in Illinois, and I'm joined by
Cecilia, John's wife.
Who's also in Illinois.
Yeah, thankfully so. She wasn't very animated about it, I guess.
It's kind of a crazy show tonight because we're recording a bit earlier than we normally do, and so I can hear the kids running around upstairs, and I suppose that you probably will as well, and all of your children are upstairs, and so they may creep in. We may also hear that, and sad to say that Cecilia is a little, as they say, under the weather. I'm very sorry about that.
Oh, thank you.
But I still have to put you through the furnace, and ask you the special guest question. Of course, you've been on the show before, once or twice, John? At least once.
At least once when we did Star Wars.
I thought she was there for the Stranger Things business, but maybe not. Anyway, Cecilia, it's a very simple question we ask all the guests, and the question is this. If you could have one superpower, just one, which would it be, and why?
I always think flying. That always sounds like the coolest one. I know it's probably a cop-out one everybody else says.
Only John.
We could fly around the world together.
Oh, really?
See?
That's like...
That was proof that we were
proof,
matched.
yes.
Yep.
I feel like everything else in my body is being brought down by gravity right now. So
oh
the
my
idea
gosh,
of flying
you're
is
funny.
especially
Yeah.
elevating.
Sure. Fair enough. Well, no, that is a fine answer. We'll have to assemble all of the answers someday and put them in a document because we've gotten some fun ones. But flying, I mean, who wouldn't want to? And then, you can be a hero or heroine if you want, if you choose to, if you're willing to put those you love in danger. I don't know. Here we go. So the topic of this episode, you've already seen it, you've clicked on it. 7 saints you should know about. And so why, John, do you suppose that we would summon Cecilia in this moment of gestation and sickness to stand as a witness for the saints?
Well, because this is the topic that's actually about something, so we needed somebody that actually knows something, not just somebody that can make things up as they go, as we do. So it was good to actually, because we would get caught if we were making up saint names and why they should be known. So we brought in a ringer. Cecilia, does quite a bit with the saints, and the saints are so important for us to know about because they help inspire us. They give us courage in our dark times. And they really inform us about how we can live for Christ. And so Cecilia is always telling me about the saints. And I thought, well, I should have her tell everybody else about the saints.
Cecilia, but I know that you've prepared 6 names, and I asked nicely if I could throw in one. And at the end, we'll do some just quick honorable mentions. But before we get into our little litany, would you have anything to say in general about the appreciation of the saints, not necessarily in the way of devotion or worship or entrusting of prayer? We've touched on that a little bit in other episodes, but it's certainly in your capacity as mother and teacher. What's some of the groundwork that you would lay for not only why is it important to revere the saints? I mean, we know we know about them, yeah, but what's some inspiration that you would offer as we begin to learn about some of these lesser-known figures of faith?
Well, I think for me at least, I like to read through at least 4 or 5 saints' biographies each day, like little mini bios, as part of my daily prayer. And what it does for me is it reminds me of the great variety of our Catholic faith, how diverse it is in the different ways people have come to follow Christ and live for him. But also, genuinely, I think what I find most uplifting about reading their lives is how genuinely they struggled and were honest about their struggles, and they overcame them. And so for me, as a wife with wifely struggles, and as a mother as motherly struggles, as a teacher with teacher struggles,
sure.
I find great consolation to know that there are other people that had those same struggles. I love, learning about the lives of our Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph, but sometimes, I feel
They're hard to
to
be in touch
relate
with.
to, a woman that had no pains during labor. As a mother, you need somebody that had 7 or 8 kids and certainly felt the pains of motherhood and age, wearing on you. So, saints that also have that shared experience, I think, in a certain way, I find even more applicable and meaningful in my own personal devotion.
Well, what can I say? That's outstanding. And so, out of your experience, and obviously, I mean, I don't know of any other person that I could think of that would even have that much of a daily devotion to the saints. I mean, just like you said, where do you find these little bios? Do you have like an encyclopedia of some kind, or?
Yeah, as part of my morning prayer routine, I read the daily mass readings through the Laudate app, and it also has a little section on Laudate where it says Saint of the Day, and it sometimes will list up to 20 different saints and blesseds. And so they always list, the first and most obvious saints, but I always like, scrolling down to the end to see who else is listed as well. And those are kind of the fun ones that some of those come to mind right now as saints that had really kind of various backgrounds that you don't often hear about.
Right.
Yeah, I think a lot of ones that I'm always often inspired by, Cecilia come home and, do you know today is the feast of the Korean martyrs, or these things that, like so much of the church is even unaware of
Yeah.
great numbers of people that gave their lives for the church in heroic manners, and we don't know their names, and so it's such a great depth. I know also the Magnificat highlights the saint of the day, and there are other things, but Laudate is definitely a great resource. Or iBreviary probably also has.
I think so. I'm not as familiar with that one.
Well, thank you for kind of putting this together, and I'd say we have our little litany here, and so we have it listed out here, and so if you would take us through a few, and I'll talk about one, and then you take us through a few more, and
Okay.
Obviously general biographic information, if you have any information about how they got to be a saint, or whatever level they're at, that'd be helpful. And we'll just spend 3 to 5 or so minutes with each person, and we offer this for you all, for the listeners. Maybe you're going to hear this and say, oh, pish posh, but I suspect that we are all in to learn a few things about saints unknown to us before this episode. So Cecilia, please take it away.
Okay, great. So the first 2 I'm going to start with are Mexican martyred saints. And I feel I should give just a little bit of historical background. So back in the, around the beginning of the 1900s, last century, there was the Mexican Revolution, a big upheaval of their, political system, everything. And so in kind of the years following that revolution, there was a period of great persecution of the Catholic faith in Mexico. And so it specifically happened because of the Mexican Constitution in 1917, where they, in the Constitution, wrote 5 specific anti-Catholic, anti-religious laws that targeted priests and the church in the celebration of faith in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And so the period was known as the Cristero War. Cristero, meaning the soldiers for Christ. And so during this time of persecution, some historians estimate that upwards of 60, 70,000 people were killed in this period that specifically targeted the Catholic Church. And one of the laws, for example, specifically tried to reduce the number of priests in each Mexican state. And so in some cases, you only had 1 priest per every, 2,000, 3,000 people. And so if you can imagine, that the idea of the scarcity, so many priests and bishops were either forced to stay and be persecuted, or some even fled into the United States during this time.
There was a recent movie that came out.
So if you've ever seen the movie For Greater Glory,
yes,
it was with like Andy Garcia and Oscar Isaacs and a few others. They starred in this movie that surrounded this period of intense persecution.
Yeah. Some
of the actual characters they portray are real historical saints, and so I'll talk about that now. So that's kind of the background, where you have this period of specifically the president at the time. His name was I always get his names backward, but it's Elias Plutarcho Caius. And so the laws were specifically called the Caius laws. And he was an atheist and a communist. And so he specifically implemented these laws. They hadn't been implemented since 1917, but when he came to office following Porfirio Diaz, he strictly enforced them. And so that began this kind of religious persecution. So the first saint that I want to mention, and there's more than 30 saints that in recent years have been canonized from this war, most of them starting with Pope Benedict, and even in recent years, many of them have continued with Pope Francis through the canonization process. So the first I want to talk about, his name is Saint Miguel Agustin Pro. We happen to name our son Michael after this one, Michael Augustine. After.
Oh, all right. All right.
He was a priest. So Father Miguel Agustin Pro was a priest that during this time, celebrated the Catholic faith, was trying to train young seminarians and spread the faith and just be present sacramentally and pastorally to the people in Mexico at a time where many priests were being framed and persecuted and trying to be scared out of conducting their priestly ministries. Well, eventually the government officials caught up with him, and in a very public execution, they photographed all the stages of his martyrdom, where they shot him publicly. They gave him multiple opportunities to denounce the faith. And so commonly what they would do is they would say, simply deny that Jesus is God, that Jesus is Lord. And so all of the Cristeros, those faithful Catholics, whenever they were faced with this question, would commonly cry out, "Vivo Cristo Rey," which means, long live Christ the King. And so St. Miguel Pro, of course, died with those dying words. He wanted to make the name of Christ the King known. And so they executed him by a firing squad, and they took, a bunch of pictures and published it in all the newspapers across Mexico, to scare other priests and bishops and other Catholics away from publicly, displaying their faith.
He was quite a character. And when he died, he put his arms outstretched like the crucifix, and was shot. And you can see these pictures of him being shot. But he was quite a character too. He often would walk around with a big cigar in his mouth. There was this story that the federales came to one of the places where he had been hiding, and he ran out the back door. They ran in the front door. He walked around the block, came back up, came in behind them and said, "Where's that priest? I know he's here," and was talking to the police that were there to arrest him, going, "I saw him. He was around." And then he walked out. But he had just this incredible brazen bravery for Christ,
Wow.
and just on fire. And so we have a son, as Cecilia said, named after him. And what an incredible guy he was.
The second saint that I wanted to mention from the same time period is Saint Jose Sanchez del Rio. He was a 14-year-old boy that died as a martyr during this time of persecution. And so he also was a saint that his death became widely known because of his young age, and because especially of his courage in the way that he faced persecution and death. I often use him as an example to the high schoolers I teach of the great heroism, lived by some martyrs even in recent times. And so, like I said, he was about 14 years old, and what was really kind of astonishing about his death is just his perseverance. It was recorded very, very detailed that when he died, they tortured him in really horrible ways. One of the things they did, and this is depicted in the movie For Greater Glory, is they shaved off the bottoms of his feet and made him march around. And so with each level of torture, they would ask the same question, just simply say that Christ is dead. And so as he was marching around with his bloodied feet, he still would say, "Vivo Cristo Rey, long live Christ the King." They proceeded to stab him, and with each time they would give him an opportunity to denounce his faith, and each time he would say, "Vivo Cristo Rey." And so finally they realized that this boy, after multiple attempts of offering him a chance out, that he wanted to live his entire life for Christ, that they ended up, I think he died by firing squad, but with his last dying breath, as he was laying on the ground, it said that he traced the shape of the cross in the sand next to him and kissed it and said, "Vivo Cristo Rey." So again, another just,
very stirring. Yeah.
Breathtaking example of faith.
That's something we see from so many of the martyrs of the Cristero Wars. They're really worth reading about. They're modern day saints. We have pictures of them.
Yeah.
But so many of them young people. We often think of saints as these holy people that lived off in monasteries. These were young people in the prime of their life, willing to lay down their life for Christ. It just is extraordinary. So they're one of the groups of saints that is. If you look at no one else, I really dive into some of those saints because they're so inspiring, they're so recent, and they're just normal kids. They're normal people, young men and women.
Yeah. So yeah, he's one of those. One thing just to add in there is kind of a recognition in our liturgical calendar is we celebrate, we honor the memory of the Cristero martyrs with the Feast of Christ the King. So. So Pope Pius XII made that a holiday, the Feast of Christ the King. He named it that in honor
directly
of
in response to
the martyrdom in Mexico, and as a way of kind of publicly, acknowledging their perseverance in faith.
Another reason why it is the most badass medal of all the liturgical holy days.
Yeah.
The solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe. You can only ever say it by saying the whole thing.
Right.
Just to make sure no one confuses it for some other kind of king. This is not Burger King, okay? This is the king, okay? Thank you. And thank you for the history. I really appreciate the context. Let's go to number... Is this number 3?
Number 3.
Very good. Okay, keep going.
The other ones.
Yep. Yeah. So the next one is Saint Athanasius.
No, that's my dude.
He was
an oldie but goodie.
Yeah. So he's
right. Yep.
He certainly by no means is a modern saint, but he's one that we owe all of our our modern Christology and everything that the church has stuck through in terms of its authenticity and orthodoxy. We owe to Saint Athanasius. Yeah. He of course was the bishop that fought against the Arian heresy, which was named after a priest, Father Arius, who tried to denounce Christ's divinity. He said that Jesus was not God, but simply a lesser form and simply an elevated man. And so this is a heresy that spread throughout the church in many parts. And so St. Athanasius was a bishop that denounced it and fought vehemently against it, even to the point where he was kicked out of his own diocese and exiled multiple times. And ended up dying from complications from his exile. And so, he's been exonerated as one of, not just a saint of the church, but a doctor of the church for continuing to teach, the truth that Jesus is not just man, but he's God. And so, we'd believe much different things, if it weren't for saints like Athanasius and the others who worked in conjunction with him.
It's difficult to imagine a time. I mean, I guess, of course, now, with just the growing daily schism in the church, and certainly in our division from and with, I guess, in some respect, with Protestantism. I'm sorry. It's hard to imagine living in a time like that with the Arian controversy, but we still hold on to the relic of it is of course in the Nicene Creed, and so whenever you read it, you can think about this thing that came out of it, to be certain. God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. That put it in the mouths of all Catholic worshipers.
And he's a universal saint in a sense that what he gives to us, his formulation of Christ's divinity, is a common Christian heritage among most denominations now.
Yeah.
And so, somebody that we all can celebrate his heroism. And he was somebody that, if I was correct, he had a fiery temper too, I believe. And
well, there's all sorts of neat stories, like he was baptizing kids in the ocean when he was like 6 or 7,
yeah,
sure. And he was discouraged by his local priest, but they recognized early on that he certainly had that fire.
That's awesome.
Yep. So he's a saint, and I think especially for today's age, where people want to kind of try and make our faith seem just one among many. I think this truth that Jesus is God and Jesus is Lord is one that we need to proclaim, because it really makes our Christianity unique from other philosophies, other forms of religion. It really is.
Yeah,
something.
And we're not going to water down the faith to make it more palatable. Well, everybody's saved no matter what you do. That people were out fighting for the very truths that we so readily don't cling to.
Yeah. And his feast today is when? Do you know?
Oh, I forget. I should know this. I want to say it's in the spring sometime.
I have it in front of me. It's it's on May 2nd, of course.
There we go.
Definitely in the spring, so you can remember him in May. Okay, let's go. Who's the next person on the list?
The next one I have is Gianna Beretta Mala.
Sure.
Saint Gianna Beretta Mala. She was a woman saint that lived. She was Italian by birth, and she lived in Italy. She was a doctor. I think internal medicine for a number of years, and got married later in life. Had 3 children. Initially, no complications, but with her 4th pregnancy, she developed a form of cancer that her doctors put to her the moral question: would you rather abort the baby and treat the cancer and live, or not, and maybe face the consequence of death? And so, as a Catholic and a very devout mother, she said, "There's no way that I can abort my child," but rather chose to wait on having chemotherapy for fear that it would risk the life of the child. And so, so the baby was delivered safely, and then, but it was too late. Her cancer had progressed so much that when she went to have it treated, that it was too late. So she ended up dying of cancer, but was able to bring to term another beautiful baby. And so she was canonized as a saint for her great heroism.
And on her deathbed too, she what was she saying on her deathbed?
I can't remember.
You had told me this at one time, that when she was on her deathbed, she was saying all for Jesus.
Mm.
She once again, in recent times, color photographs, of her, and her, obviously, her, is it what's her name? The 4th child.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Oh my gosh, I think that someone I know saw her recently, because that's all she does, is just travels around. I mean, obviously, she's got a lot to share.
My mom is a saint, let me tell you.
Yeah. Like, how many people? Like, maybe one. Maybe there are like 5 people in the world who can say that. Maybe, I don't even know for sure. So that's amazing. And meaning no disrespect to her at all, because it is a miraculous story, but an ordinary person. I mean, not baptizing kids in the ocean when she was 6, right?
Right.
Like just a person of genuine, simple, humble faith, went to mass, hated the music like everyone else. I don't know, just a regular person, and yet at the moment, like all these stories come together. At the moment of decision, abandonment to Christ.
Yeah, and certainly she could have chosen to treat the cancer. That also is morally acceptable.
Yeah.
But the heroic path she chose of waiting, and waiting to make sure that she gave her child the best chance at life by waiting to it be born and everything else. She certainly chose a really heroic path in that.
So a wonderful saint for mothers and wives, just incredible virtue.
Yeah. Let me jump in here with one of my own, and we're talking about, you mentioned Athanasius. Well, just a little bit before he came along, there was a gal born who knows when, we don't know, but she died. We know when she died, and she died in 225 in Alexandria, Egypt. And we're talking about Saint Apollonia. Now, I discovered her when a friend of mine was going through all of this oral surgery, like, one of these like major reconstruction kind of things, surgery upon surgery upon surgery, very anxious, and so kind of like in a call for prayer. And so I looked around and thought, well, surely there's a patron saint of oral surgery or of mouth issues, and there she was. And her story is also a simple one. She was a martyr. I say simple. It's it's very dramatic, but a virgin martyr who suffered in Alexandria during the uprising against Christianity, and it's sort of like some of the other features or figures we have. The one of the highlights is sort of the nature of her death. Most Christians were getting out of Alexandria. Obviously, they're being persecuted. No thanks, we're going to go. They're leaving all their stuff behind. And Apollonia was seized. She was captured. And she somewhere in the city, somewhere she was beaten really severely. And in the course of her beating, all of her teeth were knocked out. Great. So that's a good beating. I mean, that's pretty intense. And so then they prepare this bonfire, and they threaten to throw her in if she does not, simply say that Jesus is not God. They're to say, this is it. We're going to torture you, or just renounce her. That's all it is. And apparently, as the reports suggest, she kind of played. She was very tricksy about it, because she sort of begged them to wait, like acting as if she was pondering their requests. And who knows how it played out, but instead, she jumped into the fire herself. And so then, of course, suffered martyrdom. She jumped willingly into the flames and died. And so many churches in the area and altars are dedicated to her. And because of the specific nature of her beating and having all of her teeth knocked out, she's the patroness of dentists and people suffering from toothaches, other dental or oral diseases, oral surgery. And you could say, I know it's a real thing. People who even suffer from, what's it called, John? White coat syndrome, the fear of the chair, of the dentist's chair. She might be someone to ask for intercession, but not only because she had her teeth pulled out without anesthetic, but obviously as a patroness of that kind of thing. So just maybe, it's not fun. It's a martyrdom. It's a terrible story, but she's kind of an interesting figure, I think, certainly for, again, her full, commitment of her life to Christ at the end, and totally unwilling to reject the faith. So good for her.
Yeah. With these saints and the Cristeros saints, just all you have to say is just deny Jesus, and they wouldn't do it. Man, I'm fearful for that. I can barely give up a hamburger on Friday during Lent, or that extra piece of chalk. Well, it'll be okay. Jesus will just forgive me on this. Or, think about how hard it is to stick to it. Oh, I can just get away with this one thing right now. Man, what faith it takes.
It's too bad. Do you remember, not meaning to slow you down, Cecilia, but do you remember, oh my gosh, I hate that I would even have to phrase it this way, but I can't remember which shooting it was. Isn't that such a terrible thing to say? But it was in the 90s, or was it like
Columbine with Rachel Scott?
Yes, and she was asked, gun to her head. You know this story better, Cecilia.
Yeah,
but
who of you are Christians? And she said,
Christians. Yeah, she raised her hand. She was like the second one to die.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I don't know if she's Catholic or not, but certainly we can still revere her for that.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we do something in our Catholic school to like think about her as an example of integrity and friendship. And so we talk about her in our school to encourage the building of friendship and the to move away from bullying. So
that's
her
awesome.
name was Rachel Scott.
Yeah.
All right, who else is on our list?
All right, the next one I have is Blessed Nicholas Steno.
Okay.
So he was a bishop of the church. He actually started out as a convert from the Lutheran faith in Germany, back during the 1800s or so. I don't remember exactly. But his specialty before he actually became a bishop and priest, he spent a lot of time studying the fossil record, studying geology, studying the anatomy of animals. And so he's I studied geology and geoscience as part of my background degree before I studied theology. And so we heard about him all the time because he was the person that gave the modern what are the modern laws for
when you read
aging
a science
rocks.
book, you hear about him.
Yeah, you hear about Steno's laws, about how we determine the age of rocks based on the age of other rocks and different things that happen within the formations of the earth. And
so why is he important for us to know about?
So I like him especially because here again you have a regular guy who was living a regular life and was really interested in the sciences, but later become a Catholic bishop and priest. And so the church revered him, and he never gave up that kind of inquisitive nature, to always be seeking out what is the best action and what is the best pastoral plan even for his flock, just like he did in studying the sciences. He always wanted to make sure that science was true and following laws that were truly scientific.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so exciting about him, because it helps to smash that false image of of religion versus science, and Catholics or Christians not being scientific. That so many of the greats. I mean, all of our fundamentals from genetics and DNA, were great Christians. We're at the beginning of those, Francis Collin and Mendel and so many people, Christians, contributed so much to the world of science.
Apparently also involved in paleontology. That's what Wikipedia is telling me. What a fascinating person. Wow.
Paleontology is dinosaurs. So
Yes, indeed.
Falls in geology. Okay.
Well, no, I'm just saying. It's just I'm looking at his scientific contributions down here. Unless I'm mistaken, it's a different. Nicholas Steno. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Danish.
Yep.
Born to a Lutheran. It says John here. In October 1666, two fishermen caught a huge female shark, blah, 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 boring science stuff, no one cares. Steno's work on shark teeth led him to question how any solid object could come to be found inside another solid object, such as a rock or a layer of rock. The, quote, solid bodies within solids, end quote, that attracted Steno's interest included not only fossils, as we would define them today, didn't define them then, I guess, but minerals, crystals, incrustations, veins, and entire rock layers or strata. So he was there. He was, they didn't know what to call it or what it was yet, but he was there putting in his research. So thank God we have one more Catholic person to throw out there into the void when you hear that criticism. The church has always been against science. They're at each other. They can never coexist. Well, thank you, blessed Nicholas Steno, for keeping it tight, and pray for us, please. We'd like to put a ST in front of your name. Now, actually, what was his business here? I just read by very quick. Oh, the canonization process for him was begun in 1938, and Pope John Paul II beatified him in 1988. So there you go. Who is next?
The next one I have is also in the process of canonization, in the venerable stage, but it's Pope Pius XII.
Okay.
Who was the Pope during the Second World War. And so one of the reasons I selected him is you often hear criticism about him, but what you rarely hear in the media is actually how much he did for the Jewish community, and how much he really did a lot to oppose Hitler. There were a few statements of him, outwardly, but his actions certainly show that he was very busy at work in trying to protect Jews within the Vatican walls, but also around the church in Europe as well.
Wasn't he helping to provide Christian birth certificates and smuggle Jews out?
Right. So when they look at the population of Vatican City during the war, and the years where the Nazis moved into Italy, in the first year the population of Vatican City more than quadrupled, because they were taking in Jewish refugees, and they had made them baptismal certificates and birth certificates to try and protect them within
underground railroad.
Exactly. And so
wow.
So he did a lot there. And so just to kind of, I don't want to spend too much time on him, but there's a lot of research out there that I don't have time to go into now, but 2 books just to kind of mention for our listeners. The first one was written by Rabbi David Dolan, The Myth of Hitler's Pope. And it's written by a Jewish rabbi, obviously, who demystifies this idea that Pius did nothing. And so he talks a lot about his efforts to protect Jews in and around Europe. Another one is Ronald Rychek, and he wrote Hitler, the War, and the Pope. Also another good read on this area, because usually what you hear is that the church, again, did nothing, was silent. But these 2 particular writings really, and there are various others, that really talk about how the Jewish community reveres him as a protector.
Wow. Unbelievable. I mean, just to be in that position during that time, are you kidding?
Yeah.
And the whole world is involved in this, and Catholics, the Catholic Church, it's such strength in America. That's unbelievable. And I just, again, just for the listeners, I'll include the Wikipedia links in the description. Check this out. It's pretty dope that his canonization was begun at the end of the Vatican II. At the end of the final session. So the very last thing they did as they were convening together is Pope Paul VI opened it up. Like one last thing, and so that's a very special thing for him to be honored in that way. But what an amazing man! Wow.
Yeah, and he did a lot, not just to condemn Nazism, but also he also did a lot to condemn modern forms of communism and other these other philosophies that were very pervasive in society. So his writings also greatly testified the need to oppose those systems of government.
And he was the one who gave the unjust war verdict. He was the one, that seldom, rarely seen position from the Vatican on warfare. Wow. Summi Pontificatus is the encyclical that was written while the Second World War broke out. Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. He's known for quite. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Last one.
The last one. Take us home. Or was he 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He was 7. But let's have one more just for
still
fun.
7. Apollonia was just an addendum for you.
She was outstanding. People,
she
tooth
was.
sufferers all over the world care for her, and then we'll have some honorable mentions. Take us to the whatever.
The last one I have is another female saint, Saint Catherine Drexel. She's a saint that lived here in the United States.
Shoot! What? Hold on, an American saint. I don't know about that.
Yeah, she lived in Philadelphia. That's where she was raised.
In Philly. Oh, come on.
Mm-hmm. She was an heiress to a great fortune. Her and I think 3 or 4 sisters were going to inherit over like 15 million from their father, and so she was like I said, at the height of Philadelphian society, living at the top levels and the top echelons and all that kind of stuff, and in her during that time after preceding her father's death, she began to feel a great call to become a nun, to follow, a religious vocation. And so I don't know exactly how it worked out, but it was going to create some complications for her plans of charity. But she ended up being able to donate somehow millions, to the poor in and around Philadelphia. But specifically, she had a passion to work with Native Americans. I don't exactly know the story of how, but she had visited several reservations out in South Dakota and Colorado and around, and wanted to work with the Native American people and trying to help provide for them, and the poverty that they were experiencing. As well, she also wanted to reach out to the African American community, seeing the poverty that they were having to live under. And
wow.
So she gave her life to founding schools specifically for these two communities in the western states, and also I believe in Louisiana, I think is the other pocket that came to mind. So she's also kind of a great saint just to kind of think about in terms of just reckless abandonment to God, not a martyr, but still gave up great wealth, great affluence for the sake of living this deep surrender to God and willingness to give her life entirely to Him.
Another amazing story. Wow. Well, thank you for these remarkable witnesses to discipleship and yes, to abandonment to Christ, whether in life or death. So some honorable mentions. John, anyone come to mind for you?
Our wives. They for putting up with us. That's quite saintly.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
If you had to choose one person to get kicked up into at least have their cause for canonization opened, who would it be? Like someone who's not in it at all.
Father Eugene Lutz.
That is a great choice. Cecilia.
I don't know. It's a good question.
Your husband.
My husband, because he puts up with me.
I don't think that you can do that while you're alive, but maybe.
No, you
can't.
You officially have to be dead.
For me, we're talking G.K. Chesterton, or of course J.R.R. Tolkien. I think either of them would make absolutely. I think Chesterton should be a doctor of the church, but was he just a bad man? I don't know. They're gonna find so much in his life, and they're like, we can't do this.
They just need to start praying for intercessory miracles here and see if we can't.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, thank you, Cecilia. Now go back to bed. John will take care of everything. And so, John, closing thoughts. We do have one little thing to say at the end. Anything from you though on this, or any words to your wife?
No, thank you so much for joining us. And this is how every day is in our house. I get to hear all these wonderful things. So
Outstanding.
it's delightful. Yeah.
Well, hey, we want to just a quick shout out to Apple C. Beto. Unless I'm missing some word in there that I don't know, but he, they are our newest YouTube subscriber. Thank you, AppleCebedo. App placebo. I can't. Anyway, thank you for subscribing, getting us one person closer to that 100 goal. Thank you very much. This has been the Catholic Forge, and we thank you for listening very much. Thanks again to Cecilia one more time. We'd like to close, as always, with a prayer and a blessing. May God the Father,
God the Son,
and God the Holy Spirit bless you, guard you, and lead you to eternal life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening to the Catholic Forge. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and will leave us a positive rating and review wherever you listen. How about 5 stars for Cecilia and for these 7 to 9 saints that now you know about? How about the 5 stars for them? You can help out the show in a big way by sharing it with your friends and family. As always, you can continue the conversation with us on Facebook and Twitter, and to get a hold of us, you can reach us at thecatholicforge@gmail.com. Hey, who would you like to be a saint? Okay, that isn't one right now. I want to hear about it. For more information regarding the podcast, visit our website at www.catholicforge.com. We especially thank our extremely knowledge-filled wives. They are very smart. We are way below the line. They're very smart. Thank you, God, for that. We thank them for their continued support. Cecilia, would you say, I speak for you every episode. Would you say you support this? I mean, speak for yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank God.
It's an hour that she doesn't have to deal with it.
Well, we thank you, Cecilia and Tori and Alice. Ben, you're still tied in. I'm sorry, we will not let you go, for the support of this project. And we thank, all of you very much for listening.